The twins arrange a blind date for their dad, only to unknowingly pick their own biological mother. Hello, my very beautiful family. Welcome home to your channel, Mr. Peter Stories, a place where every story is love and every word is from my heart. But today, I'm hurting. Fake channels are stealing my voice, my stories, my hard work. They pretend to be Mr. Peter while I stay up late, pouring my soul into every line. It's painful, but I won't give up because I have you. Let me pray for you before we begin. Dear Lord, bless my beautiful family. Cover them with peace, surround them with love. Heal their hearts, lift their spirits and provide for every need. Touch their homes with joy and let miracles find them. Protect their children, bless their dreams, and let them never feel alone. In Jesus' name, amen. Family, please subscribe, like, comment, I stand with Mr. Peter, and share this in your WhatsApp group or anywhere you can. If you see fake channels, unsubscribe and report them. Let's begin this story with nothing but love. The mastermind's lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the sleek glass walls of the Rivera hillside home for a brief electric moment. Rain drummed against the expansive windows, creating a symphony that echoed throughout. The modern architectural marvel. Inside, 10-year-old identical twins, Zephyr and Atlas Rivera, huddled over a glowing tablet screen, their faces bathed in blue light. "This is definitely the one," Atlas whispered, his finger hovering over a profile photo of a striking woman with sea-green eyes and an enigmatic smile. "Look at how she explains coral reef conservation. Dad would totally geek out over that." Zephyr nodded, brushing his dark curls away from his face, the same unruly curls his twin and father shared. "Her profile says she's never been married, no kids either." He frowned slightly. "I wonder why. She seems awesome." Thunder rumbled outside as if in agreement, and both boys instinctively glanced toward the studio wing where their father, Orion, worked late into the night as usual. The award-winning architect had built them this stunning glass sanctuary nestled against the mountainside, with panoramic views of the valley and forest below. But lately, the vastness of the house only emphasized what was missing. "Dad needs this," Atlas said firmly, tapping the screen to select the profile. "Remember last night? I caught him looking at that old box of photos again." Zephyr's expression darkened. "The one with the woman he tries to hide from us?" He was crying, Atlas. Actually crying. The twins had never seen their father cry before. That night, Orion Rivera was strength personified, the man who carried them both up the mountain trail when they were tired, who built elaborate tree houses and taught them to swim against strong currents. The sight of him sitting alone in the soft glow of his desk lamp, shoulders shaking as he traced a finger over a faded photograph, had shaken them to their core. "That settles it," Atlas declared, straightening his glasses with determination. "Operation Heal Dad's Heart begins now." He started to type a message from their father's profile, which they'd created 3 weeks earlier after borrowing his phone while he showered. Zephyr peered over his brother's shoulder, reading aloud in a whisper. "Your work with marine ecosystems sounds fascinating. I've always believed architecture should honor and enhance natural environments rather than competing with them. Maybe we could exchange ideas sometime." He nodded in approval. "Not too eager. Sounds exactly like Dad. Smart." Atlas hit send with a flourish. Now we wait. But waiting wasn't the twins' strong suit. After refreshing the screen 17 times in 2 minutes, they were rewarded with a response. "She answered," Zephyr hissed, nearly dropping the tablet. In excitement, the response from Dr. Lyra Valencia, PhD, was prompt and intriguing. "Your Rivera glasshouse was featured in Architectural Digest last year, wasn't it? I kept that issue. The way you designed that coastal project to collect rainwater and create artificial reef structures beneath the foundation was brilliant. I'd love to hear more about your sustainability approach. The boys stared at each other. With wide eyes, she knows Dad's work, Atlas whispered reverently. It's a sign. A floorboard creaked down the hallway, and both boys scrambled to hide the tablet under a throw pillow. Their father appeared in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the soft lighting of the corridor. At 42, Orion Rivera cut, an impressive figure. Powerful shoulders, strong jawline, now covered in the short beard he'd grown in recent years, and eyes that Architects magazines had once described as visionary. But those eyes now carried shadows beneath them, and the smile lines had been joined by others that spoke of solitude and quiet resignation. Shouldn't you two be asleep? It's almost midnight, he said, his deep voice gentle despite the reprimand. We were watching the lightning, Zephyr replied smoothly. The twins had perfected the art of half-truths. Orion's expression softened. Nature's greatest architect, he mused, walking toward the wall of windows, creating masterpieces in seconds that disappear just as quickly. The twins exchanged knowing glances. Their father always waxed poetic about design when he was distracted, a good sign for their covert operation. Dad, Atlas ventured carefully, are you happy? The question hung in the air, unexpected and weighty. Orion turned from the storm viewing. With surprise, what kind of question is that? He crossed to the sectional couch where they sat, lowering himself between them. Of course I'm happy. I have you two troublemakers, don't I? But are you lonely? Zephyr pressed, uncharacteristically direct. A flash of something, pain perhaps, crossed Orion's features before he masked it with a chuckle. Who has time to be lonely with deadline pressures and two sons who apparently never sleep? He ruffled their hair simultaneously, a practice move developed over years of parenting identical boys. Now seriously, Bed, you have your robotics tournament tomorrow. After extracting promises of immediate sleep, Orion kissed their foreheads and left. The moment his footsteps faded, the tablet reappeared. He didn't answer the question, Atlas noted shrewdly. Which means yes, Zephyr concluded. Very lonely. They resumed their scrutiny of Lyra Valencia's profile. Her accomplishments were listed. Modestly, groundbreaking research on coral rehabilitation, development of an artificial reef system now implemented worldwide, guest lecturer at prestigious universities. Her few personal details mentioned a love of underwater photography, jazz, piano, and spicy food. No mention of her past, Atlas observed, scrolling through the limited information. It's like her life began 15 years ago with her first research paper. Zephyr's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Everyone has a past. She's hiding something, or running from something, Atlas added. Another lightning bolt illuminated the room as they examined her photos more carefully. Lyra releasing a rehabilitated sea turtle, Lyra accepting an environmental award, Lyra laughing on a research vessel. In each image, despite her smile, her sea-green eyes held a hint of melancholy. She's perfect, Zephyr declared suddenly. Because she's smart, because she's sad too. Zephyr pointed to her eyes in the photos. See, she's lonely just like Dad. The twins crafted a careful response from their father's account, and within an hour, a natural conversation was flowing. They strategically mentioned Orion's upcoming architectural conference the following weekend, completely fabricated, and his disappointment about missing his son's robotics competition. Just before finally surrendering to sleep, they received her latest message. I find it refreshing that you speak so warmly about your children. Most men on these platforms barely mention their kids. They sound wonderful. Atlas typed one last message before they logged off. They're my world. Everything I've built has been for them. In the darkness of their bedroom later, as rain continued to drum against the glass walls, Zephyr whispered, What if she's the woman from the photo box? Atlas snorted softly. That would be impossible. But what if? Zephyr persisted. Then we'd be the greatest matchmakers in history, Atlas murmured sleepily. Neither boy could possibly know how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how their innocent meddling would unearth secrets buried beneath a decade of silence. Outside, the storm intensified, nature's foreshadowing of the emotional tempest to come. Chapter 2. Ocean Memories. Lyra, Valencia, stood on her balcony overlooking the city coastline, the salt-tinged breeze gently lifting her braids adorned with small shell ornaments that caught the morning light. Dawn painted the horizon in watercolor hues of tangerine and rose, a daily spectacle she never tired of witnessing. Her apartment, though modest in size, commanded a breathtaking ocean view that had been her single non-negotiable requirement. When relocating to the Coastal Research Center 5 years ago, behind her, the distinct chime of a new message notification sounded from her laptop. Since creating that ridiculous dating profile, her sister Aria's insistence that brilliant marine biologists shouldn't die alone surrounded by coral samples, her inbox had been a parade of disappointing prospects. Yet in the past week, one conversation stood apart. Orion Rivera, the acclaimed ecological architect whose glass masterpieces seemed to defy gravity while honoring the natural world. Lyra hesitated before moving back inside to check the message. Their exchanges had surprised her with their depth and unexpected connection. She couldn't remember the last time a virtual conversation had felt so familiar. She clicked on the notification, coffee mug cradled in her palm. You mentioned you'll be in the Hills region this weekend? As luck would have it, my conference was just postponed. If you'd like to stop by, I know 2 young engineers who would love to meet a real-life ocean doctor. Their words. No pressure, just thought since you're studying the mountain watershed impact on coastal ecosystems. You might enjoy seeing our sustainable water system firsthand. The boys and I would be happy to give you a tour. Lyra's heart quickened unexpectedly. Meeting in person was a leap she hadn't anticipated making so soon. Yet something about Orion's messages resonated with her. His passion for environmental harmony, his obvious devotion to his sons, his thoughtful questions about her research that went beyond polite interest. She placed her mug down and ran her fingers absently over the small tattoo on her wrist. A simple design of 2 tiny waves intertwined. The familiar ache that accompanied any thought of children twisted in her chest. Not today, she whispered to herself, pushing away the memories threatening to surface. Her phone rang, breaking the moment. Her sister's name flashed on the screen. I was just about to call you, Lyra answered, moving back to the balcony. Your dating app experiment has taken an unexpected turn. Aria's rich laugh filled the line. Please tell me someone decent finally appeared in the wasteland of mediocre men. Possibly, it's that architect I mentioned, Orion Rivera. The glass house guy. The one who designs those gorgeous eco-buildings that collect rainwater and have solar everything? Aria sounded impressed. Isn't he that ridiculously attractive man who was on the cover of Architecture Today last year? Dark curly hair, piercing eyes, looks like he could build you a house with his bare hands. Lyra rolled her eyes. I'm more interested in his ideas on sustainable design than his cover model qualities. Liar, Aria teased. So what's the unexpected turn? He's invited me to visit his home. Apparently, it's near the watershed area I'm studying this weekend. Silence filled the line before Aria spoke again, her voice carefully neutral. You're considering going to a man's house on a first meeting? It's not like that. His sons will be there. They're 10 twins, actually, and apparently interested in marine biology. Lyra's voice caught slightly on the word twins, something she hoped her sister wouldn't notice. No such luck. Aria's tone softened immediately. Are you sure you're ready for this? Someone with children? The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken history. "It's just a professional visit," Lyra deflected, watching a seagull dive and soar over the sparkling water below. "Besides, it's been 10 years. I can't avoid children forever." "That's not what I meant, and you know it," Arya sighed. "Just be careful with your heart, and send me his address and all the details before you go." After promising to text the information later, Lyra ended the call and turned back to her laptop. Her cursor hovered over the reply button as uncertainty crept in. The sensible response would be to decline, suggest meeting in a public place first, maintain the professional boundaries she'd perfected over years of academic conferences and research collaborations. Instead, her fingers began to type, "Thank you for the invitation. I'd be interested in seeing your water conservation system, and I'd be happy to answer any questions your sons have about marine ecosystems. Saturday afternoon would work for me, if that suits your schedule." Before she could reconsider, she hit send and immediately closed her laptop, as if distance from the screen could distance her from the decision. She moved to her bookshelf, fingers tracing along spines until she found what she sought, an issue of Architectural Digest from the previous year. She'd kept it for the feature on sustainable home design, telling herself it was purely professional interest. The magazine fell open naturally to the centerfold spread. The Rivera glass house perched majestically on a hillside, its transparent walls capturing both sunrise and sunset, its design simultaneously imposing and harmonious with the surrounding forest. The article described how the home captured rainwater, utilized geothermal heating, and incorporated living walls of native plants. But it was the photograph of the architect himself that had always caught her attention. Orion standing on the expansive deck, his two small sons at his side, their identical faces bright with mischief and intelligence. Something about those boys had tugged at her from the first moment she saw the image. Perhaps it was their obvious devotion to their father, or the way they stood confidently beside him, clearly beloved and secure in their place in the world. Lyra closed the magazine, pushing aside the familiar hollow ache beneath her ribs. She walked to her home office, where specimens from her latest research expedition were meticulously organized on shelves. Work had been her salvation, her purpose, her excuse. Dr. Lyra Valencia, the youngest recipient of the Oceanic Conservation Award, guest lecturer at prestigious universities worldwide, developer of revolutionary coral reef restoration techniques. What no one in her professional world knew, what she had buried so deeply that sometimes she could almost believe it herself, was that before she was any of those things, she had been something else entirely. She opened her desk drawer and removed a small weathered box. Inside lay a simple gold band and a faded photograph, its edges soft from handling. She rarely allowed herself to look at it, but today, with the prospect of seeing twin boys near the same age, she needed the reminder of why she'd made the choices that defined her life. The photograph showed a much younger version of herself. Hair in twists, face glowing with an expression of joy she barely recognized anymore. Beside her stood a tall, handsome man with curls falling over his forehead, his arm wrapped protectively around her visibly pregnant form. They stood on a beach at sunset, laughing at some forgotten joke, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. Lyra's phone chimed with a new notification. With trembling fingers, she returned the photograph to its hiding place before checking the message. "Saturday afternoon is perfect. The boys and I look forward to meeting you. I've attached directions to the house. GPS isn't always reliable in the hills. Drive safely and let me know if you need anything else." Attached was a digital map marked with clear directions to the Rivera glass house. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to quiet the inexplicable nervousness fluttering in her chest. This was simply a professional meeting with an interesting colleague, nothing more. And yet as she gazed out at the endless horizon where sky met ocean, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something momentous, about to step off into unknown depths. Outside her window, dark clouds began forming on the distant horizon, the first harbingers of the weekend storm that meteorologists had been predicting. A storm that would soon gather strength, much like the whirlwind of long-buried emotions preparing to break loose in the glass house on the hill. Chapter 3. The Invitation. "Dad, you really need to upgrade your wardrobe," Zephyr commented, holding up one of Orion's countless blue button-downs with a critical expression. "You know they make shirts in other colors, right?" Orion glanced up from his drafting table where he'd been working since dawn, pencil tucked behind his ear. "What are you doing in my closet?" Atlas appeared behind his brother, arms full of discarded options. "We're helping you look presentable. You have a visitor coming today, remember?" Orion's brow furrowed in confusion. "Visitor? The Miyamoto project consultation isn't until next week." The twins exchanged conspiratorial glances. "Dr. Valencia?" Atlas prompted. "The marine biologist? You invited her to see the house's water system this afternoon?" Orion's pencil clattered to the floor. "I did what now?" Zephyr stepped forward, his expression carefully innocent. "From the dating app? You've been messaging her all week." "Dating app? What are you—" Orion's eyes widened as realization dawned. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and crouched before his sons, one hand on each of their shoulders. "What did you two do?" Atlas, ever the strategist, spoke first. "We created a profile for you, but Dad, you've been talking to her yourself for days." "We just facilitated the introduction. You've been impersonating me?" Orion's voice rose in disbelief. "Not exactly," Zephyr countered, chin raised defiantly. "We just wrote the first message. Everything after that was all you." Orion ran a hand through his hair, processing the implications. "So all those notifications I thought were from my architecture forum were from Aura," Atlas supplied helpfully. "That's the dating app. And now this woman, Dr. Valencia, thinks I've invited her to our home. Today?" Orion's voice had taken on a dangerous calm. The twins nodded simultaneously. "She's arriving at 2 o'clock, Zephyr added. "And she's really cool, Dad. She's saved like entire reef systems." Orion stood, pacing the length of his bedroom. "This is completely inappropriate. You can't just invite strangers to our home. I need to message her immediately and explain this." "Misunderstanding." "No!" both boys shouted with such alarm that Orion stopped mid-stride. "Dad, please," Atlas said, stepping forward. "At least meet her. She's smart and interesting, and she asked real questions about your designs. She's not like those women at your gallery showings who just want to take selfies with the famous architect." Orion crossed his arms. "This isn't about whether she's interesting. This is about you two violating my privacy and catfishing an unsuspecting woman." "We didn't catfish anyone," Zephyr protested. "Everything on your profile is true. And we only did it because—" He trailed off, looking to his brother for support. "Because you're lonely," Atlas finished quietly. "We hear you sometimes, Dad. Walking around the house at night when you think we're asleep, looking at old pictures, talking to yourself. And you work all the time," Zephyr added. "When was the last time you did anything fun, or had a friend over, or laughed really loud?" Orion's expression softened as he regarded his sons. The unfairness of it struck him suddenly. These children worrying about his happiness when it should be the other way around. "I appreciate your concern," he said carefully, "but my social life is not your responsibility. And this," he gestured toward the phone they'd used to create his profile, "is not the way to go about it." "Just meet her," Atlas pleaded. "One time. If you don't like her, we'll never interfere again. And we'll do all your chores for a month," Zephyr added desperately. Orion checked his watch. 11:37 a.m. Less than 3 hours until this Dr. Valencia expected to arrive at their home. The proper thing would be to message her immediately, explain the situation, and apologize profusely for his children's deception. And yet he hadn't actually looked at the messaging history. What exactly had he supposedly been discussing with this woman, and what had compelled his typically self-sufficient sons to take such drastic measures? They'd never shown any interest in his personal life before. "Show me the messages," he said, finally. All of them. The twins' faces brightened as they scrambled to retrieve the hidden phone. Within minutes, Orion found himself scrolling through a week's worth of conversations between himself, or rather, his sons impersonating him, and Dr. Lira Valencia. What began as fairly innocuous exchanges about sustainable architecture and marine conservation had evolved into deeper discussions about environmental ethics, shared experiences in academia, and even some personal revelations. To his surprise, Dr. Valencia came across as thoughtful, brilliant, and refreshingly direct. No wonder the boys had been drawn to her profile. She was exactly the type of person Orion would have been interested in meeting under different circumstances. "See?" Zephyr prompted, watching his father's face carefully. "She's perfect." Orion fixed his sons with a stern look. "Nothing and no one is perfect. And regardless of how interesting Dr. Valencia may be, the fact remains that you lied to her, and to me. But are you going to meet her?" Atlas pressed. Orion sighed deeply. If he cancelled now, Dr. Valencia would have wasted time preparing for this visit. And truthfully, after reading their exchanges, he found himself curious about the woman who had engaged so thoughtfully with his architectural philosophy. "I will meet her," he conceded, raising a hand to silence the boys' cheers. "But only to apologize in person for this deception and to make it clear that you two will face serious consequences." The twins' celebration dimmed only slightly. "What kind of consequences?" Zephyr asked warily. "That depends on how embarrassing this encounter proves to be," Orion replied, returning to the pile of shirts on his bed. He selected a charcoal grey button-down that his sister had given him for his birthday, one of the few non-blue items in his wardrobe. "Both of you will stay in your rooms until Dr. Valencia leaves," he continued, heading toward the shower. "I'll explain the situation to her, apologize, show her the water system, since she's apparently coming to study it for research purposes. And then that will be the end of this little matchmaking scheme." "Understood." "Yes, Dad," they murmured in unison, their expressions suggesting they considered this a small price to pay for getting their father to meet Dr. Valencia. As Orion closed the bathroom door, he heard Zephyr whisper dramatically to his brother, "Phase 1, complete." By 1:45 p.m. the house was immaculate. Orion had changed his outfit twice, settling finally on the charcoal shirt with dark jeans, and the twins had been ordered to their rooms with strict instructions not to spy or interfere in any way. Orion paced the open living area, rehearsing his apology. He would be direct but gracious, taking full responsibility while explaining the situation honestly. Dr. Valencia seemed reasonable from their exchanges. Surely she would understand that he had been an unwitting participant in his son's scheme. The wall of screens in his home office displayed security camera feeds from the property's entrance, a necessary precaution for a glass house in a remote location. At precisely 1:58 p.m., a sleek electric vehicle appeared on the winding drive that led up to the house. Orion straightened his shirt and took a deep breath, preparing to greet his unexpected guest with as much dignity as the awkward situation would allow. The car came to a stop in the circular driveway, and the door opened to reveal a woman stepping out, her face momentarily hidden as she reached back into the vehicle for something. When she straightened and turned toward the house, Orion's prepared greeting died in his throat. Even at this distance, even after 10 years, he would have recognized her anywhere. Those distinctive high cheekbones, the graceful curve of her neck, the way she carried herself, head high, shoulders back, a quiet confidence in every movement. Impossibly, inexplicably, Dr. Lyra Valencia was the same woman whose photograph he kept locked away in his desk drawer. The same woman who had walked out of their lives a decade ago, leaving behind twin infant sons and a shattered man who had pieced himself back together for their sake. She was the woman he had loved more than his own life. The woman he had married in a beachside ceremony with sand between their toes and promises that proved as transient as the tide. She was the twins' mother, and she was walking toward his front door, completely unaware that her past awaited her on the other side. Chapter 4. Recognition. The doorbell chimed through the house, a gentle melody that belied the seismic moment it announced. Orion stood frozen, his mind racing through impossibilities. How had Lyra appeared at his doorstep after all these years? What cruel cosmic joke had his sons unwittingly orchestrated? His heart thundered against his ribs as he forced himself forward. With each step toward the door, memories rushed back. Lyra laughing in the waves, Lyra crying in the hospital room, cradling newborn twins, Lyra's note on the kitchen counter. The morning she disappeared from their lives. Through the glass partition beside the door, he could see her silhouette, her braids now shorter than he remembered. Her posture still carrying that researcher's focus, as if perpetually observing, documenting, analyzing. She hadn't noticed him yet, her attention caught by the living wall of native plants beside the entrance. With trembling fingers, Orion pressed the door release. The soft hiss of hydraulics announced his presence before he could find his voice. Lyra turned, a professional smile already forming, a smile that died the instant their eyes met. The research bag she carried slipped from nerveless fingers, hitting the polished concrete with a soft thud. Orion! The word escaped her lips like a prayer, a question, and a revelation all at once. Thunder rumbled in the distance, an atmospheric punctuation to the moment. Dark clouds had gathered over the mountains, the predicted storm advancing more quickly than forecast. "Hello, Lyra." His voice sounded foreign to his ears, too controlled, too calm for the hurricane of emotions raging inside him. She took an instinctive step backward. This can't be your last name on the profile." "Was Rivera." "I changed it after the divorce," he said quietly. "Went back to my mother's family name." Recognition dawned in her eyes. "The twins in the magazine article, they're..." "Yes." He couldn't bring himself to elaborate further. Lyra's hand moved to her throat, fingers splaying against her collarbone as if to physically hold herself together. "I should go." She bent to retrieve her fallen bag, but another rumble of thunder, closer now, made her pause. A flash of lightning illuminated the valley below, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack. Storms moving in fast. Orion observed professional habit taking over, where personal words failed him. The mountain road isn't safe in these conditions. As if punctuating his warning, rain began to fall. Not a gentle introduction, but an immediate deluge that transformed the landscape into an impressionist blur of greens and grays. Lyra stood paralyzed in the downpour, water cascading over her. Stunned features. The moment stretched between them, him inside the shelter of their dream home, her caught in the storm of consequences, until Orion moved aside, a silent invitation she had no choice but to accept. She stepped over the threshold, bringing with her the scent of rain and the ghost of lotus perfume she still apparently wore. Water dripped from her clothes onto the heated floor, forming small puddles that reflected the glass ceiling above. They stood in silence, 3 feet of physical space and 10 years of absence between them. "The boys arranged this," Orion finally said, struggling to organize his thoughts. "They created a dating profile for me. I had no idea until this morning." "They don't know who I am," Lyra stated rather than asked. her analytical mind already putting the pieces together. No, they know almost nothing about you, just that you existed. Another flash of lightning, another immediate boom of thunder. The storm had arrived in earnest now, sheets of rain lashing against the glass walls with such force it sounded like thousands of tiny fists demanding entry. "Dad?" a small voice called from the hallway. "Is your guest here?" We heard the doorbell. Both adults turned to see Zephyr's curly head peeking around the corner, curiosity warring with the sheepish expression of a child expecting punishment. Lyra's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the storm. Her hand flew to her mouth as she took in the boy's features. A perfect blend of her own and Orion's, the unmistakable imprint of shared DNA. She began, but no further words emerged. Zephyr stepped fully into view, his eyes widening as he took in the elegant woman standing dripping in their entryway. "You're Dr. Valencia, the ocean scientist?" Before either adult could respond, Atlas joined his brother, adjusting his glasses as he assessed their visitor. "You're soaking wet. Dad, shouldn't you offer her a towel or something?" The simple, childish prompting broke the paralysis that had gripped Orion. "Yes, of course. I'll get you something dry, Lyra. Dr. Valencia." "Thank you," she managed, her eyes never leaving the twins. The boys, meanwhile, were practically vibrating with excitement. Previous orders to remain in their rooms, apparently forgotten in the thrill of meeting their online discovery in person. "I'm Atlas," the bespectacled twin announced, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "And this is my brother Zephyr. We've read all about your work with coral reef restoration." Lyra shook his hand automatically, her composure visibly crumbling as she felt the small, warm palm against hers. "It's nice to meet you both." "Did you really swim with a great white shark?" Zephyr asked, bouncing slightly on his toes. "Was it scary?" Orion returned with a towel and a set of dry clothes. "Boys, give Dr. Valencia some space. She's just arrived and she's soaked from the storm." "Are those Mum's old clothes?" Atlas asked suddenly, eyeing the simple outfit Orion held, a pair of yoga pants and a soft sweater that had remained in the back of his closet for a decade, preserved like a museum exhibit of a life interrupted. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Orion fumbled for a response, but Lyra spoke first. "I'm sure any dry clothes would be appreciated," she said, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "Thank you for your hospitality, especially given the unexpected circumstances." "You can change in there." Orion indicated a guest bathroom off the main living area. "Take your time." As Lyra disappeared with the bundle of dry clothes, Orion turned to his sons, keeping his voice low and controlled. "I need both of you to go to the media room right now." "But Dad," both began simultaneously. "Now," he repeated firmly. "We'll discuss everything later." Something in his tone brooked no argument. The twins retreated, casting curious glances over their shoulders as they disappeared down the hallway. Alone momentarily, Orion braced his hands against the kitchen island, head bowed as he tried to process the impossibility of the situation. Of all the women in the world, his sons had unwittingly found their biological mother. What were the odds? What cruel twist of fate had engineered this collision of past and present? The bathroom door opened, and Lyra emerged wearing the clothes that had once belonged to her. The sight hit Orion with physical force. How many mornings had he watched her pad around their first apartment in that very sweater, cradling a mug of tea, planning their future? "The storm's getting worse," she observed, her voice deliberately neutral as she moved to the wall of windows. "I checked the weather radar on my phone. It's a significant system. The bridges on the mountain road you flood easily," Orion confirmed, grateful for the practical topic. "You might need to wait it out." "I can't stay here," she whispered, still facing the storm rather than him. "Those boys, They don't know who I am." "No," Orion agreed, moving to stand beside her at a careful distance. "And finding out like this would be—" He couldn't find an adequate word. "Traumatic," Lyra supplied, "for everyone involved." A particularly violent gust of wind hurled rain against the glass with such force that Lyra instinctively stepped back. Orion's hand moved reflexively to steady her, making contact with her elbow for a brief moment before they both pulled away. "As if burned. I should never have accepted this invitation," Lyra said, hugging herself. "I knew something felt too familiar about our conversations. I ignored my instincts." "Why did you?" Orion couldn't stop himself from asking. "Accept the invitation, I mean." She turned to face him fully for the first time, her eyes searching his. "Because after a decade of running, I was tired. Because your voice, even through text, still felt like home." The raw honesty of her admission hung between them, more dangerous than any accusation might have been. "Dr. Valencia," Atlas's voice called from the hallway. "Dad, is it okay if we come out now? We wanted to show Dr. Valencia our science fair project. It's about ocean acidification." Orion and Lyra exchanged a panicked glance. "We need a plan," she whispered urgently. "I can't be here when they learn the truth." "They'll figure it out eventually," Orion countered, his voice equally low. "They're too smart not to notice the resemblance, especially now that they've seen you." "Dad?" Zephyr called again. "Can we come out? We're really sorry about the dating app thing." Lyra's eyes widened. "Dating app? They were trying to find you a—" "Yes," Orion cut her off with a grimace. "Apparently they think I need companionship." A strange expression flickered across Lyra's face, something between amusement and heartbreak. "They don't know how ironic this is." "1 minute, boys," Orion called toward the hallway. To Lyra, he whispered, "We'll get through today. Pretend this is a normal, awkward first meeting. Once the storm passes and you leave, I'll figure out how to explain everything to them." "And if the storm doesn't pass quickly," she challenged. "Then we improvise," he said grimly. "It wouldn't be the first time we've faced impossible weather together." The shared memory of another storm, the hurricane that had trapped them in a coastal research station during their first year together, passed between them like an electrical current. "Come on out, boys," Orion finally called, taking several steps away from Lyra to establish a careful distance. "Dr. Valencia would love to see your project while the storm passes." The twins bounded into the room, earlier contrition forgotten. In their excitement, they carried a detailed model of a coral reef ecosystem, complete with LED lighting that simulated different pH levels. As they launched into an enthusiastic explanation, Orion watched Lyra's face. Behind her careful smile and scientific questions, he could see the truth in her eyes, the agonizing recognition of what she had walked away from, the sons she had never known, the life that had continued without her. Outside, the storm intensified, trapping them all in a glass house filled with truths too fragile to touch and questions too heavy to ask. But nature, like the past, could not be held at bay forever, and this tempest, both atmospheric and emotional, would leave nothing unchanged in its wake. Chapter 5. Truths and Consequences. And this part shows what happens when excess carbon dioxide gets absorbed by the ocean, Atlas explained, pointing to a section of their model where the miniature coral had been painted a sickly white. The water becomes more acidic, and the coral can't form its calcium carbonate skeleton properly. "It's called coral bleaching," Zephyr added eagerly. "The coral expels the algae living inside its tissues, and then it starves to death." "That's extremely accurate," Lyra managed, her scientific mind automatically engaging despite the emotional turmoil churning inside her. "Your understanding of marine biochemistry is impressive for your age." The twins beamed under her praise, exchanging triumphant glances. Atlas adjusted his glasses in a gesture so familiar that Lyra had to look away momentarily. It was the same unconscious habit Orion had during graduate school whenever he received validation for his theories. "We won first prize at the state science fair," Zephyr declared proudly. "Dad helped with the engineering, but we did all the research ourselves." "That's wonderful," Lyra said, genuine admiration in her voice. Her eyes flickered to Orion, who stood silently by the kitchen island, watching the interaction with an unreadable expression. "Your father must be very proud." "Where are my manners?" Orion interjected suddenly, clearly desperate to break the charged atmosphere. "Can I offer anyone refreshments? Tea? Hot chocolate for the storm?" "Hot chocolate," the twins chorused enthusiastically. "I'll help," Lyra offered, rising from her kneeling position beside the science project. She needed a moment away from the boys' penetrating gazes, so similar to her own that it felt like looking into temporal mirrors. In the kitchen area, she and Orion moved in a careful dance of avoidance, the spacious layout suddenly feeling claustrophobic. "They're brilliant," she whispered as she reached for mugs from a cabinet, the same blue ceramic ones she'd selected for their first apartment, she realized with a jolt. "Yes," Orion agreed, his back to her as he heated milk on the induction stovetop. "They take after their mother." The words hung between them, layered with meanings neither could fully unpack in the moment. A thunderous boom shook the house, followed by the abrupt cessation of the humming refrigerator and recessed lighting. The room dimmed to the natural, gray illumination of the storm-darkened sky filtering through the glass walls. "Power outage," Orion stated calmly. "The backup generator should kick in momentarily." As if on cue, essential systems reactivated: security, minimal lighting, climate control. But before the full power could restore, a second explosive thunderclap coincided with a blinding flash directly outside the eastern glass wall. "Lightning! Strike!" Orion muttered, moving quickly to the smart home control panel. "Too close for comfort." The twins appeared beside Lyra, their earlier bravado momentarily replaced by the vulnerability of children in an uncertain situation. "Is the house safe, Dad?" Atlas asked, his voice smaller than before. "Perfectly safe," Orion assured him. "The design includes comprehensive lightning protection, but it looks like the strike affected the backup generator connection." Lyra felt a small hand slip into hers. Zephyr, seeking instinctive comfort from the nearest adult. She froze, overwhelmed by the simple contact. His hand fit perfectly against her palm, triggering a visceral memory of tiny infant fingers wrapping around her thumb in the hospital. "It's okay to be scared of storms," she told him softly, squeezing his hand gently. "Even scientists get frightened sometimes." "I'm not scared," Zephyr protested automatically, but he didn't withdraw his hand. "I just wanted to make sure you weren't scared." Lyra's throat tightened with emotion. "That's very considerate of you." "The main road is definitely flooded now," Orion announced, studying the security feeds on his tablet. "The drainage culverts are overwhelmed." He glanced up, meeting Lyra's eyes with a loaded look that communicated what remained unsaid. She was trapped here indefinitely. "Boys," Orion said, setting aside the tablet, "I need you to check the emergency supplies in the storage room. Make sure the flashlights have batteries and count the water bottles, please." The twins recognized the transparent attempt to remove them from the room, but complied without argument, perhaps sensing the strange tension between the adults. The moment they disappeared down the hallway, Lyra released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "They're going to have to know," she whispered urgently. "Zephyr has my exact eyes, Orion. Atlas has my mother's hands, down to the double-jointed thumbs. They'll figure it out." Orion leaned heavily against the counter. "I always knew this day might come. I just imagined it differently. Prepared statements, professional family counselors, controlled circumstances, not your ex-wife appearing on your doorstep as a prospective date," Lyra finished bitterly. What cruel cosmic joke is this? Maybe it's not cruelty but closure, Orion suggested quietly. They've been asking more questions lately about their mother, about why you left. The accusation in those last 3 words hit Lyra like a physical blow. What have you told them? The truth. That their mother loved them very much, but wasn't ready to be a parent. That she had important work to do in the world. Lyra closed, her eyes against the burn of tears. And did you tell them that their father insisted they'd be better off with just him than with a mother spiraling into postpartum psychosis? That you promised to keep them safe while I got help? That what was supposed to be 6 months of treatment became a year, then 2, then somehow a decade? Is that how you remember it? Orion's voice was dangerously controlled. Because I remember begging you to come home. I remember flying to your research station in Australia with 2 toddlers, only to be told you'd transferred to Antarctica. I remember your lawyer delivering divorce papers that relinquished all parental rights. I was trying to protect them, Lyra hissed, mindful of small ears that might be listening. I was diagnosed with severe postpartum depression with psychotic features, Orion. I was hallucinating, having intrusive thoughts about harming my own babies. Do you know what that feels like? To look at these perfect beings you created and be, when terrified you might hurt them? Orion's expression softened slightly. No, I can't imagine that pain. But I do know what it's like to watch the woman I love disappear into herself, then physically disappear from our lives. To raise 2 boys who have your smile, your laugh, your scientific curiosity, and have to pretend it doesn't break my heart daily. The raw honesty stripped away Lyra's defenses. I never stopped loving them, she whispered. Or you. I just couldn't trust myself around you. A small gasp from the hallway entrance shattered the moment. Both adults turned to find the twins standing, frozen, wide-eyed and pale. You're her, Atlas whispered, his analytical mind connecting dots with devastating speed. You're our mother. Zephyr's expression transformed from shock to fury in an instant. You left us. You're the one from the pictures? Lyra stepped forward instinctively, then halted when Zephyr flinched backward. Yes, she said simply, knowing no explanation would be adequate in this moment. I'm your biological mother. Why are you here? Atlas demanded, his voice wavering between childish hurt and premature maturity. Why now? I didn't know, Lyra answered truthfully. I had no idea whose home I was coming to today. But you knew we existed, Zephyr accused, tears forming in his eyes. You knew you had kids somewhere and you didn't care. That's not true, Orion intervened, moving to stand beside his sons. Your mother cared very much. Sometimes caring means making very difficult choices. Lyra felt her own tears spill over. I was very sick after you were born. In my mind and my heart. The doctors had a name for it. Postpartum psychosis. I couldn't trust my own thoughts. I was afraid I might... She couldn't finish the sentence. Hurt us? Atlas supplied, his scientific mind grasping the medical implications. Yes, Lyra admitted, the single word carrying the weight of a decade of guilt. So you just left? Forever? Zephyr's anger had transformed into bewildered hurt. Somehow, worse to witness, I needed to get better first. And then, time passed. Your father was raising you perfectly. You were thriving. I watched from a distance when I could. I thought, I convinced myself you were better off without the complication of a mother who had abandoned you. The confession hung in the air, punctuated by another roll of thunder that seemed to shake the foundation of the house itself. Did you ever think about us? Atlas asked, his voice small. Lyra crossed to the couch where she'd set her bag earlier and withdrew a small, weathered notebook. With trembling fingers, she opened it and removed 2 identical braided bracelets. Simple designs of blue and green threads interwoven with tiny shells. Every day, she answered, holding them out. I made these on your 5th birthday, and these on your 6th. She flipped through the notebook, revealing more handcrafted items, small carved dolphins, pressed flowers, hand-drawn cards, gifts, created but never delivered over 10 birthdays. The twins stared at the collection, their expressions a complex mixture of emotions too tangled to name. "I don't understand," Zephyr said finally. "If you cared enough to make birthday presents, why didn't you care enough to deliver them?" Before Lyra could respond, Orion placed a hand on each boy's shoulder. "This is a lot to process for everyone. Maybe we should take a breath. Your mother and I made adult decisions that had nothing to do with how much either of us loves you." "She's not our mother," Zephyr declared, pulling away from his father's touch. "She's just some lady who happened to give birth to us." The words struck Lyra with physical force, though she had expected nothing less. "You're right to be angry," she said, quietly. "I've imagined this moment 1,000 times, and I never expected forgiveness." "Boys," Orion said firmly, "go to your rooms for a bit while Dr. Valencia and I talk. This isn't a punishment. We all need some space to think." "But Dad," they began in unison. "Please," he added, his tone gentle but brooking no argument. After a moment of tense silence, the twins retreated, Atlas casting an unreadable glance over his shoulder before they disappeared down the hallway. Alone again, Orion and Lyra stood in the half-light of the storm-darkened house, the weight of a decade of separation and secrets pressing down upon them. "I've made a mess of everything," Lyra whispered, sinking onto the couch, the notebook of undelivered birthday gifts clutched to her chest. "We both have," Orion countered, sitting beside her but maintaining a careful distance. "What happens now?" Lyra looked up at the man she had once planned to grow old with, the father of her children, the road not taken. "I don't know, but I think the storm is making the decision for us in the short term." As if in agreement, a particularly violent gust of wind hurled rain against the glass walls with renewed force, and somewhere in the distance they heard the unmistakable crack of a tree splitting. "The power could be out for days," Orion acknowledged, "and the roads might be impassable until the crews clear them. So we're trapped here, together." Lyra's laugh held no humor. "The universe has a twisted sense of irony, or timing," Orion suggested. 10 years is a long time to avoid a conversation." Lyra studied his face. Older now, lines at the corners of his eyes, a sprinkle of silver in his dark curls. But still, essentially the same man she had fallen in love with in graduate school. The same man who had held her through panic attacks during pregnancy. The same man who had begged her to stay when she was drowning in postpartum darkness. "Where do we even begin?" she asked softly. Outside, the sky darkened further as the storm settled in for what meteorologists had predicted would be a multi-day event. Inside, two estranged parents faced the prospect of navigating an equally turbulent emotional landscape, with two wounded children caught in the center of a tempest neither nature nor time had prepared them for. Chapter 6. Weathering the storm. The storm's fury increased as evening approached, transforming the modern glass marvel into an island amid nature's chaos. Inside, another kind of tempest brewed as the newly reunited family navigated their unexpected collision. Orion stood at the kitchen counter, methodically chopping vegetables for dinner, a simple task that offered structure amid emotional turmoil. From the corner of his eye, he observed Lyra sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, carefully examining the twins' science fair project. She maintained a respectful distance from the boys, who had retreated to the opposite end of the room with tablets and sullen expressions. "The circulation system you've designed here is remarkably accurate," Lyra commented, pointing to the water flow mechanism in their model. "Did you build this yourself?" Atlas looked up reluctantly. Despite his hurt and confusion, scientific curiosity won out. We used Dad's 3D printer for the base components and added the pumps from an old aquarium. Kit! The hardest part was calibrating the pH sensors, Zephyr added, then caught himself, remembering he was supposed to be angry, and returned his attention to his tablet with exaggerated focus. Orion recognized the familiar pattern. Zephyr, emotional, and quick to anger but equally quick to forgive. Atlas, analytical and reserved, processing internally before reaching conclusions. They were navigating this impossible situation in characteristically different ways. Dinner in 20 minutes, Orion announced, providing structure to the awkward evening. Boys, please set the table. The twins complied with minimal grumbling, their ingrained sense of responsibility overriding their desire to remain aloof. Lyra approached the kitchen area hesitantly. "Can I help with anything?" "I've got it under control," Orion replied. More curtly than intended, he softened his tone. "But thank you." She nodded, understanding the complex choreography of the moment. He needed control over something when everything else felt chaotic. "Dad," Atlas called from the dining area, "we only have 3 place settings. Should I get another for—" He trailed off, uncertain how to address Lyra. The simple domestic question carried the weight of an existential one. Was she a guest, family, something undefined? 4 settings, please," Orion confirmed quietly. Lightning illuminated the dining area through the glass walls, followed by thunder so immediate and powerful they felt it in their chests. The lights flickered ominously. "That was close," Zephyr observed, his scientific interest momentarily outweighing his emotional state. "This storm system is unusual for the season," Lyra noted, falling into the comfortable territory of meteorological analysis. "The atmospheric instability is the house plunged into darkness." "Everyone stay where you are," Orion instructed calmly, his voice steady in the sudden blackness. "The auxiliary power should activate for essential systems. Dim emergency." Lights flickered on along the baseboards, providing minimal illumination. Orion retrieved flashlights from a kitchen drawer with practiced efficiency. "The backup generator might have been damaged by that lightning strike," he explained, handing lights to each person. "I should check the system." "I'll come with you." Atlas volunteered immediately, ever the assistant engineer. "Me too," Zephyr added, unwilling to be left behind, particularly with Lyra. Orion hesitated, looking between his sons and their mother. Separating seemed unwise given the emotional volatility, but the practical matter required attention. "We'll all go," he decided. "The generator housing is attached to the garage." The small procession moved through the dimly lit house, flashlight beams creating dancing shadows. Lyra walked behind the 3 Rivera men, acutely aware of her outsider status in this well-rehearsed family unit. The garage connected to the main house through a short breezeway of reinforced glass that now vibrated with the storm's intensity. Rain lashed sideways, creating an almost solid wall of water against the transparent surface. "Watch your step," Orion cautioned as they crossed into the cavernous garage space. Lyra faltered momentarily as the flashlight beam revealed the contents. Along with Orion's electric vehicle stood a trio of mountain bikes in graduated sizes, kayaks hanging from ceiling racks, and a modest sailboat in winter storage. Evidence of a family life filled with adventure and exploration. A life she had no part in. The generator housing stood against the far wall. Orion opened the access panel and began a systematic examination, while the twins held flashlights, offering commentary and suggestions with the comfortable familiarity of routine collaborators. "Looks like the transfer switch was damaged," Orion concluded, adjusting something inside the panel. "I can bypass it temporarily, but we'll need a replacement part, which we can't get until the road's clear," Atlas observed pragmatically. "Correct. We'll have limited power for now," Enough for refrigeration, some lighting, and essential systems. No internet or entertainment centers until we can repair this properly. Zephyr groaned dramatically. No internet? During a storm lockdown with... He caught himself before completing the thought. Casting a sideways glance at Lyra, the unfinished sentence hung in the air, more powerful than if he'd completed it. As Orion made final adjustments, Lyra's flashlight beam wandered across the garage wall, where a series of height measurements were marked in permanent marker. Years of growth documented in horizontal lines and dates. Beside these were handprints in various sizes, pressed into plaster squares, decorated with shells and colored glass. Art projects documenting the twins' growing hands. A lump formed in her throat as she realized what she was seeing, a physical timeline of everything she had missed. "Got it!" Orion announced as minimal power hummed back to life. "That should hold until the storm passes." The family returned to the main house, where Orion resumed dinner preparations by flashlight and camping lantern. The twins set the table with deliberate focus, while Lyra stood uncertainly in the liminal space between kitchen and dining area, belonging nowhere. "I used to be good at this," she murmured, almost to herself. "Good at what?" Orion asked, glancing up from the portable gas burner he'd set up on the counter. "Storms," she replied. "Being without power. During my first major research expedition, we lost electricity for 3 weeks. I became the team cook because I could make anything taste decent on a camp stove." After a moment's hesitation, Orion stepped aside slightly. "The pasta needs stirring." The simple invitation to participate felt monumental. Lyra approached carefully and took the wooden spoon he offered, their fingers brushing momentarily in the exchange. The twins watched this interaction with calculating expressions, a silent communication passing between them that only identical siblings could decode. Dinner proceeded by lantern light, the storm providing persistent soundtrack to their stilted conversation. They spoke of safe topics: the science fair, recent weather patterns, the structural ingenuity of the house design, while avoiding the familial earthquake that had upended their reality. "The road will definitely be impassable until morning at minimum," Orion observed, checking his weather radar app. "Possibly longer. Flash flood warnings are in effect throughout the county." The implication was clear. Lyra would need to stay overnight. "I can sleep in my car," she offered immediately. "Don't be ridiculous," Orion countered. "The guest room is prepared." "I don't want her staying here," Zephyr declared suddenly, breaking his practiced indifference. "She's not part of this family." "Zephyr," Orion admonished gently. "It's okay," Lyra interrupted. "He's entitled to his feelings." "Why did you even come here?" Atlas asked, his question lacking Zephyr's heat, but carrying equal intensity. "If you didn't know who we were, why agree to meet a stranger from a dating app?" The directness caught Lyra off guard. She considered deflection but settled on honesty. "I've been alone a very long time, focused entirely on my research. Recently I've started wondering if I made the right choices." "You mean abandoning us?" Zephyr challenged, eyes flashing. Lyra flinched at the accuracy of his assessment. "Yes." The simple acknowledgement diffused some of the tension. Honesty, however, painful, was preferable to platitudes. "Were you really sick?" Atlas asked quietly. "After we were born." Orion tensed, prepared to intercept a topic too heavy for children. But Lyra answered before he could intervene. "Yes, very sick. Not physically, but mentally. I had something called postpartum psychosis, a severe condition that affected my thoughts and perceptions. I became convinced I would harm you both unintentionally." She spoke carefully, balancing truth against age-appropriate explanation. "But you could have come back after you got better," Zephyr persisted. "I should have," Lyra admitted. "That was my mistake. I convinced myself you were better off without me, that inserting myself into..." Your lives after years away would only confuse and hurt you. I was a coward. The stark self-assessment hung in the air, challenging contradiction. None came. Did you ever check on us? Atlas asked, scientific curiosity driving his questioning. Lyra hesitated, glancing at Orion, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Permission to continue this fragile truth-telling. Yes, I followed your father's architectural career in publications. When that magazine did the feature on this house last year, I saw your picture. I knew you were healthy and happy. She hesitated before adding, I also contribute to your college. In funds anonymously. Your father didn't know. Orion's eyebrows rose in surprise. This was news to him. So you were watching us from a distance, like some kind of science experiment? Zephyr's voice cracked with emotion. No, Lyra whispered, more like stars I couldn't reach. The poetic confession silenced even Zephyr momentarily. A tremendous crash from outside interrupted the moment, the distinctive sound of a tree falling. Nearby. That was close, Orion said, moving to the windows. Through the darkness and rain, they could make out the shadowy outline of a large pine that had toppled at the edge of the property. Will it damage the house? Atlas asked, scientific curiosity momentarily overriding emotional tensions. No, it's well beyond the structural perimeter, Orion assured him. But it may have taken down power lines, which explains why the main electricity hasn't returned. We should check the roof catchment system, Atlas suggested. With this much rainfall, the filters might be overwhelmed. Good thinking. Orion nodded appreciatively. But that can wait until morning. It's getting late, and it's been a challenging day for everyone. The understatement hung in the air, almost comical in its inadequacy. Where will Dr. Valencia sleep? Atlas asked, deliberately using her professional title, a small psychological distance from the maternal label he wasn't ready to employ. The guest room at the end of the east hallway is prepared, Orion replied. Boys, you should get ready for bed. We'll sort everything else in the morning. The twins exchanged glances, communicating silently, as they often did in moments of uncertainty. Can we talk to you alone first, Dad? Zephyr requested, casting a pointed look at Lyra. Of course. Orion turned to Lyra. The guest room is down that hallway, last door on the left. There should be everything you need, but let me know if something's missing. Lyra recognized the dismissal. Thank you. Good night, Atlas Zephyr. I know this has been unexpected and difficult. I'm truly sorry for the disruption. The twins acknowledged her with awkward nods, neither quite meeting her eyes. As Lyra retreated down the hallway, she heard Zephyr's voice, pitched low, but still carrying in the open concept space. Dad, what happens now? Is she going to try to be our mom or something? She didn't remain to hear Orion's response. Some truths were too tender for eavesdropping. The guest room was minimalist but comfortable, designed with the same attention to detail evident throughout the house. A wall of glass faced the forest, now invisible in the storm-blackened night, except when lightning illuminated the thrashing trees. Lyra sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. From her bag, she withdrew the small notebook of undelivered birthday presents, a decade of maternal love expressed in secret, tangible artifacts of her greatest regret. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, hastily wiping away tears. Orion entered, carrying additional blankets and a battery-powered lantern. The temperature might drop overnight with the limited power. These should help. Thank you. She accepted the offerings. Careful to avoid contact with his hands, Orion lingered in the doorway, clearly wrestling with unspoken thoughts. "They're remarkable," Lyra said quietly. "You've done an incredible job raising them." "They are remarkable," he agreed, "and they're resilient, but this is a lot to process." "I never imagined seeing them again like this," she confessed, "without preparation, without a carefully crafted explanation." In my scenarios, I had child psychologists and counselors and planned statements. Life rarely cooperates with our careful plans. Orion's tone held no accusation, just weary acceptance. The question is, what happens now? What did you tell them? When they asked if I was going to try to be their mother, Orion leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking every bit his 42 years. I told them that adults sometimes make complicated decisions that take time to understand. That you being here doesn't change the fact that I'm their father and they are my world. That whatever happens next will consider their feelings first. Lyra nodded, tears threatening again. That was the right answer. Was it? I don't know what the right answer is anymore. He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture from their shared past. They want to know if you're staying or leaving again. I couldn't answer that. The question hung between them, the same one that had torn them apart a decade earlier. I don't know, Lyra admitted. I never planned for this scenario, but I know I can't just disappear from their lives again, now that they know who I am. No, Orion agreed. That door can't be closed again. Thunder rumbled overhead, as if nature itself were commenting on the gravity of their situation. Try to get some rest, Orion said finally. Tomorrow won't be any easier, but at least we'll face it with clearer heads. As he turned to leave, Lyra called after him softly. Orion? He paused, looking back. How did you do it? Raise them alone, build your career, create this beautiful life, all while carrying the weight of my absence. His expression softened, revealing a glimpse of the man she'd once known intimately. One day at a time, with a lot of help from my sister, with the knowledge that they deserved the best possible life, regardless of how broken I felt inside. The raw honesty of his answer stripped away any illusion that her departure had been without consequence for him. Good night, Lyra, he said quietly, pulling the door closed behind him. Alone in the darkness, listening to the storm rage against the glass house Orion had built for the family she had abandoned, Lyra finally allowed herself to weep. For the decade lost, for the pain in her children's eyes, and for the impossible road that lay ahead. Outside, the tempest continued unabated, mirroring the emotional storm contained within the glass walls. Nature and human hearts, both weathering forces too powerful to control. Chapter 7. Breaking Dawn. The storm retreated during the night, leaving behind a world washed clean. Dawn's first light spilled through the eastern glass walls of the Riviera, home, transforming raindrops clinging to the transparent surface into prisms that scattered rainbow fragments across the polished concrete floors. Lyra stood at the kitchen window, her reflection ghost-like against the brightening landscape. Sleep had proven elusive. How could she rest when her children slept under the same roof for the first time in a decade? She cradled a steaming mug of tea between her palms, watching as the rising sun gradually revealed the storm's aftermath. Broken branches scattered across the property, a section of deck railing torn away, small rivulets carving temporary pathways down the once manicured hillside. The soft padding of feet behind her triggered an instant tension in her shoulders. She turned to find Atlas standing in the doorway, his curly hair sleep-tousled, glasses slightly askew as he assessed her with analytical caution. "Good morning," she offered, voice carefully neutral. "Morning." He moved toward the refrigerator, maintaining a deliberate distance. "Power's still out, but the essential systems are working." "Your father thought of everything when designing this place." Atlas nodded, retrieving orange juice. "He built redundant systems for everything important. The house can run on solar backup for 7 days if necessary." Pride colored his voice as he spoke of his father's foresight. Lyra watched him pour his juice, noticing how his movements echoed Orion's methodical precision. The resemblance struck her physically. This child who was half her, yet wholly formed by a life she hadn't shared. "You can ask me questions," she said softly when she caught him studying her between sips. "I'll answer anything you want to know." The offer hung between them. Atlas adjusted his glasses, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Lyra's chest tightened with recognition. "Why marine biology?" he finally asked, surprising her with the scientific rather than emotional inquiry. A small smile found its way to her lips despite the tension. "I grew up on the Florida coast. My grandmother was a champion swimmer who taught me to dive when I was about your age. The underwater world felt like visiting another planet, peaceful, mysterious, following entirely different rules than life above. I wanted to understand it, protect it." He absorbed this information with a thoughtful nod. "Did you always want to be a scientist?" "Not always. I went through phases of wanting to be an astronaut, then a veterinarian." She hesitated before adding, "Your father was actually the one who encouraged me to pursue marine conservation specifically. He recognized how passionate I was about coral reef systems long before I understood it myself." Atlas's eyes widened slightly. "Dad pushed you toward it?" "Yes. We met in college. He was studying sustainable architecture while I was exploring different scientific paths. We both cared deeply about environmental protection, just from different angles. He designed structures that worked with nature. I studied ecosystems that needed preservation." "That makes sense," Atlas murmured, more to himself than to her. "Dad always talks about biomimicry in his designs, studying natural systems to solve architectural problems." "Exactly." Warmth colored her voice, finding this connection between her past and their present. "Your father and I used to stay up late discussing how coastal developments could incorporate reef protection. Some of his early sketches actually informed my later research on artificial reef structures." A floorboard creaked, announcing another presence. Zephyr appeared in the doorway, his expression immediately hardening when he saw Lyra engaged in conversation with his brother. "What's going on?" he asked, suspicion evident in every syllable. "Just getting juice," Atlas replied with forced casualness. "The storm's passing." Zephyr moved to the windows, assessing the damage while maintaining a careful distance from Lyra. "The mountain road will still be flooded," he observed, the implication regarding her continued presence clear in his tone. "Probably," she acknowledged, choosing not to engage with the subtext. Orion appeared next, fully dressed despite the early hour. He took in the tableau of his assembled family with unreadable eyes. "Good morning," he greeted, moving toward the coffee maker before remembering the power situation. He reached instead for the camp stove he'd set up the night before. "Everyone hungry? We should eat something substantial while we wait for updates on the road conditions." The domesticity of breakfast preparation provided welcome structure to the awkward gathering. Orion assigned tasks with practiced efficiency, Zephyr cracking eggs, Atlas setting the table, while he managed the camp stove. Lyra stood uncertainly until Orion handed her a packet of freeze-dried berries to rehydrate, a simple task that nevertheless included her in the family routine. As they worked, sunlight strengthened, illuminating the rain-washed landscape outside. Water droplets on the glass walls created prismatic effects, filling the space with dancing rainbows. Despite the storm damage outside, the scene held an undeniable beauty, nature's clean slate after chaos. "Look at that," Atlas noted, pointing toward the eastern hillside where a vibrant double rainbow had formed. "Perfect conditions for refraction." "And a good omen," Lyra suggested softly. "Are you superstitious, Dr. Valencia?" Zephyr asked, his tone somewhere between genuine curiosity and challenge. "Not exactly superstitious," she replied thoughtfully, "but I believe in signs from nature. When you spend enough time observing natural systems, you start to see patterns and messages that others might miss." "Dad says that's called pareidolia, the Tendency to find meaningful patterns in random stimuli, Atlas offered, displaying his characteristic hunger for knowledge. Your father is scientifically correct, as usual, Lyra acknowledged with a small smile toward Orion, who was focused intently on the eggs he was scrambling. But sometimes, recognizing patterns helps us make sense of chaos, even if the meaning comes from within us rather than the pattern itself. That's quite philosophical for breakfast conversation, Orion commented, serving the eggs onto 4 plates. They ate mostly in silence, the rainbow outside gradually fading as the sun rose higher. The simple meal in the aftermath of emotional and atmospheric storms felt strangely significant. Their first shared family meal in a decade, impromptu and imperfect. We should check the property for damage, Orion suggested as they cleared the dishes. Make sure the drainage systems are handling the runoff properly. Can I check the weather sensors? Atlas asked eagerly. I want to download the storm data for my meteorology project. Good idea. Zephyr, would you inspect the east side retaining wall? Make sure there's no erosion undermining the foundation. The twins nodded, clearly accustomed to post-storm protocols. Orion turned to Lyra with careful formality. Would you like to join the inspection? You might have insights about the watershed impact that would be valuable. The invitation, though professionally framed, represented an opening, a chance to witness her sons in their element, to participate in family routine rather than observe from the periphery. I'd appreciate that, she replied, equally formal. They dispersed to their assigned tasks, pulling on rain boots and light jackets from the mudroom. As they stepped onto the deck, Lyra noticed a complex model partially visible through the workshop windows, something that looked like a miniature underwater habitat. What's that project in the workshop? She asked, curiosity overcoming caution. Atlas and Zephyr exchanged glances before Atlas answered reluctantly, It's our design for a submersible research station. We've been working on it for almost a year. May I see it? Lyra asked, careful to keep her tone casual, despite her growing excitement. Zephyr shrugged with studied indifference, but led the way to the workshop, a glass-walled extension of the main house filled with tools, 3D printers, and various works in progress. The centerpiece was unmistakable, a sophisticated model of an underwater research habitat designed to rest on the ocean floor with minimal environmental impact. The detailed structure incorporated several innovative features that Lyra immediately recognized as scientifically sound. This is extraordinary, she breathed, leaning closer to examine the clever ballast system. You've solved the anchoring, a problem that plagues most stationary ocean platforms. It uses biomimetic adhesion inspired by remora fish, Atlas explained, professional pride momentarily overriding his personal reservations. The attachment points create temporary bonds with rock surfaces without damaging reef structures, and the external shell uses photosynthetic panels that cultivate algae for both oxygen production and data collection, Zephyr added, unable to resist sharing their innovation despite his emotional conflict. The habitat becomes part of the ecosystem it's studying. Lyra looked between the twins and their creation, momentarily speechless. They had designed exactly the type of research station she'd been advocating for years, one that merged architectural innovation with marine science. They had somehow combined their father's structural expertise with her conservation priorities, without even knowing her work. This is precisely what marine researchers have been trying to develop, she said finally. The integration of form and function with environmental consciousness. It's brilliant. The boys absorbed the praise with complicated expressions, gratified by the professional validation, yet conflicted about receiving it from the mother who had abandoned them. Dad helped with the structural integrity calculations, Atlas noted loyally, and the material specifications. But the environmental integration was our idea, Zephyr added, a hint of defiance in his voice. We researched ocean conservation, Principals ourselves. The unspoken message was clear. They hadn't needed her expertise to understand marine protection. They'd found their way to it independently. You've both inherited the best qualities of scientific minds, Lyra acknowledged, careful not to claim credit for their brilliance. Curiosity, innovation, ethical consideration of impact. Orion appeared in the workshop doorway, taking in the scene with a carefully neutral expression. I see you've discovered their magnum opus. It's revolutionary, Lyra replied honestly. Has anyone from the oceanographic community seen this design? Not yet, Orion answered. They were planning to enter it in the Young Innovators Marine Science competition next month. They should, Lyra said firmly. This concept could transform coral reef research methodologies. A complex emotion flickered across Orion's face. Pride in his sons mixed with something more complicated, as he watched Lyra recognize and validate their work in her field. We should continue the property inspection, he suggested after a moment. The forecast shows more rain this afternoon. As they moved through the property, Lyra observed the sophisticated water management systems Orion had designed, while the twins demonstrated their expertise in post-storm assessment. At the weather station, Atlas proudly showed Lyra their monitoring equipment, even asking if she might share coastal data to compare with their land measurements. His first voluntary engagement with her professional knowledge. When they returned to the house, they found utility crews had begun clearing operations on the main road below, their heavy machinery audible in the distance. They're working faster than expected, Orion observed, checking updates on his tablet once they were inside. The road might be passable by tomorrow. The news hung in the air, a deadline of sorts. Their temporary forced coexistence had an expiration date approaching. I should check in with my research team, Lyra said, using her reconnected phone as a convenient retreat from the weight of Orion's gaze. The coastal monitoring stations probably recorded significant data during the storm. As she moved toward the guest room, she heard Zephyr's voice behind her. Is she leaving tomorrow? She didn't linger to hear Orion's response. Chapter 8. Bridges by. Mid-afternoon, the utility crews had restored limited power to the Rivera home. Lights flickered on, the refrigerator hummed back to life, and most significantly, internet connectivity returned, instantly reconnecting the isolated family to the outside world. Lyra sat at the kitchen island, scrolling through urgent messages from her research team. The coastal monitoring stations had sustained considerable damage during the storm, and as project director, her presence was needed immediately. The road clearing is progressing faster than expected, Orion announced, reviewing updates on his tablet. They've reached the second switchback. Access should be possible by tomorrow morning. The news hung in the air like a deadline. Time was running out on their forced reunion. I should be able to leave tomorrow then, Lyra said quietly. My team needs me at the research center. Yes, Orion confirmed, his tone neutral. Assuming no further complications. Across the room, the twins exchanged significant glances. Though they'd maintained careful distance from Lyra throughout the day, both had been watching the adults with calculated interest. Will you come back? Atlas asked suddenly, the directness of his question silencing the room. Lyra looked up from her tablet, momentarily speechless. I would like to, if that's something you all want. Why would we want that? Zephyr challenged, though his tone lacked its earlier venom. You didn't want us before. That's not true, Lyra replied softly. I wanted you desperately. I just couldn't trust myself to be the mother you deserved. And now you can. Skepticism dripped from Zephyr's words. Lyra set her tablet down, giving him her full attention. The truth is complicated, Zephyr. When you were born, I developed a severe mental illness that made me believe terrible things. The doctor said I needed time to heal, and your father agreed to care for you both while I got treatment. But you never came back, Atlas observed, his analytical mind cutting to the heart of the matter. No, I didn't, Lyra admitted. That was my mistake, my failure. The treatment took longer than expected, and by the time I was stable, you were toddlers. Your father had created a beautiful life for you. I convinced myself that disrupting that life would be selfish. It was, Zephyr stated flatly, selfish to stay away. The assessment hit Lyra like a physical blow. You're right, she acknowledged, surprising both boys with her candor. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was also protecting myself from facing what I'd lost, from facing the possibility that you might reject me. Like we're doing now? Atlas asked perceptively. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. Yes, exactly like that. The brutal honesty of the exchange left no room for platitudes or easy solutions. They sat in the uncomfortable truth, the sounds of the house settling around them. I have something to show you, Orion said unexpectedly, breaking the silence. Both of you come with me. The twins followed their father down the hallway toward his study, a room they knew contained his most important projects and private papers. Lyra remained seated, understanding this moment wasn't meant for her. Minutes stretched into a quarter hour before Orion returned alone, his expression somber but resolved. What did you show them? Lyra asked. The letters, he replied, simply. The ones you sent during the first 3 years. Lyra's hand flew to her mouth. You kept them. I thought, when you never responded. Of course I kept them, Orion said quietly. They're the only pieces of you the boys had, even if they didn't know it. I was waiting until they were old enough to understand. And now? Now they need to know that their mother never truly abandoned them, that you checked in, that you asked about them, that you sent child support even when the divorce agreement didn't require it. He leaned against the counter, suddenly looking exhausted. They need the whole truth, not just my simplified version of it. Before Lyra could respond, the twins reappeared, their expressions transformed. Atlas carried a small wooden box, while Zephyr clutched a bundle of envelopes tied with faded blue ribbon. You sent birthday cards, Atlas said, his voice thick with emotion. Every year. And money for our education, Zephyr added, confusion evident in his face. Dad put it in accounts for us. Yes, Lyra confirmed. It wasn't nearly enough to make up for my absence, but I wanted you to have options, opportunities. Why didn't you visit? Zephyr demanded. But the question held more pain than anger now. These letters talk about wanting to see us when we were ready. Your father and I agreed that any visit would be on your terms, when you were old enough to understand the situation. Lyra glanced at Orion, who nodded confirmation. We thought it would be confusing for you to have a mother who appeared occasionally and then left again. So instead, we had no mother at all, Zephyr concluded, his logic devastating in its simplicity. That wasn't the intention, Orion interjected gently. We thought we were protecting you both. From what? From knowing her? Atlas gestured toward Lyra. From having two parents who cared about us, even if one couldn't live with us. The criticism landed squarely on both adults, leaving them without adequate defense. In their efforts to shield the twins from confusion and pain, they had created a different kind of wound, the ache of unnecessary absence. You're right, Orion, acknowledged. We made a mistake. He looked to Lyra, including her in this shared responsibility. We thought we were doing what was best, but we should have given you more credit, more choice. Can we still have a choice? Atlas asked, his voice small but determined. About what happens next? Absolutely, Lyra replied instantly. What do you want? The twins exchanged a long look, communicating in that wordless way that identical siblings often develop. We want to know you, Atlas said finally, not just as Dr. Valencia, the marine biologist, but as our mother, Zephyr finished, the word clearly difficult for him to say, but slowly, not all at once. Lyra nodded, tears spilling freely now. I would like that very much. However you want to proceed, at whatever pace. Feels comfortable. You need to go back to your research center tomorrow, Atlas stated pragmatically. But maybe you could come back next weekend. We have a robotics competition on Saturday. The simple invitation, so casually offered yet so profound in its implications, momentarily robbed Lyra of speech. She'll be there, Orion answered when Lyra couldn't. If that's what you both want, we do, Atlas confirmed, while Zephyr gave a tentative nod. And maybe, Atlas continued, warming to the idea, you could show us your research center sometime? I've been designing an underwater monitoring system for my science project, and I'd like to see how the professionals do it. I would be honored. Lyra managed, finding her voice. The center has an education program every other Saturday. You'd both be welcome any time. Zephyr, still clutching the letters, asked the question that had clearly been weighing on him. Are you and Dad getting back together? Both adults froze at the direct inquiry. That's not, Orion began. We haven't discussed, Lyra said simultaneously. The twins watched their stammering parents with identical expressions of skepticism. We just want to know the plan, Atlas clarified. So we're prepared. Orion recovered first. There is no plan yet. This reunion was unexpected for everyone. Your mother and I need time to figure out what this means for all of us. But whatever we decide, Lyra added firmly, it will include both of you in the conversation. No more adult decisions that affect you without your input. This promise seemed to satisfy the twins, at least temporarily. The tension in the room eased slightly as a new, fragile understanding began to take shape between them. Outside, the sounds of clearing operations continued as crews worked to reopen the mountain road. Inside, a different kind of clearing was underway. The removal of decade-old barriers between a mother and her sons, the building of bridges across a chasm of absence and misunderstanding. By evening, as they prepared another meal together, this time with functioning appliances, the atmosphere had shifted. The guarded hostility had given way to cautious curiosity. Zephyr asked Lyra about her diving experiences, while Atlas inquired about her education path. Small questions, tentative connections, the first tender shoots of relationship emerging from long dormant seeds. As darkness fell, they gathered on the deck to observe the stars emerging in the clear post-storm sky. Orion pointed out constellations to the boys, a familiar nighttime ritual. When Lyra quietly identified a satellite tracking across the darkness, explaining its oceanographic monitoring purpose, the family completed the circle, science and wonder binding them in this moment of fragile new beginning. Later, as the twins prepared for bed, Lyra found herself alone with Orion in the kitchen, the weight of the day's revelations and reconciliations hanging between them. Thank you, she said simply, for keeping those letters, for showing them to the boys, for giving me a chance to explain. Orion leaned against the counter, his expression unreadable in the dim light. I always intended for them to know you someday. I just imagined it happening differently. Life rarely follows our careful plans. Lyra echoed his words from the previous night. What happens now, Orion? Between us? He met her gaze directly, decades of complicated history reflecting in his eyes. I don't know. You hurt me more deeply than I thought possible when you left. For years, I was just going through the motions for the boys' sake, building this life, this career, this home. It was all for them. And now, she whispered, now I need to consider what's best for them and for me. He ran a hand through his hair, that familiar gesture she'd always loved. We can't just pick up where we left off, Lyra. Too much has happened. I know, she acknowledged, the simple acceptance carrying the weight of 10 years of separate paths. But maybe we can find a new way forward for all our sakes. No promises were made, no declarations offered. But as they stood in the quiet kitchen of the house that should have been their shared home, something shifted between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. but the first fragile foundation for whatever might come next. Chapter 9. Tidal pulls. The morning of Lyra's departure dawned clear and bright. Road crews had worked through the night, and by breakfast, the mountain route had been declared passable for essential travel. The storm's physical isolation was officially ending. Lyra packed her few belongings in the guest room, carefully folding the borrowed clothes that had once been hers. Each item carried memories: the soft sweater she had worn on early morning, walks with Orion during their first year of marriage, the yoga pants she had lived in during her pregnancy. How strange that these artifacts of their shared past had remained in this home, preserved like museum pieces of a life interrupted. A soft knock at the door pulled her from these reflections. "Come in," she called, hastily wiping away unexpected tears. Atlas entered, carrying a small object wrapped in tissue paper. He shifted awkwardly from foot to foot before extending it toward her. "I made this for you." "Well, finished it this morning, but I've been working on it for a while." Lyra accepted the gift, carefully unwrapping the delicate tissue to reveal a small, intricate model of a coral reef system, complete with tiny fish species crafted from colored glass and wire. "Atlas, this is extraordinary," she breathed, examining the detailed construction. "You captured the symbiotic relationships perfectly." He adjusted his glasses, pleased by her scientific appreciation. "I used your research papers as reference, the ones published in Oceanic Conservation Quarterly last year." The revelation that he had sought out and read her academic work struck Lyra deeply. "You've read my research?" He nodded. "Dad helped me access the journals. I've been following your work for about 2 years now." Lyra glanced up in surprise. "Your father knew you were reading my papers?" "He's the one who suggested it, actually," Atlas admitted. "When I got interested in marine ecosystems, he said I should learn from the best in the field." The thought of Orion encouraging their son to connect with her work, even while maintaining the physical separation they had agreed upon, added another layer to the complex tapestry of their shared history. "Thank you for this beautiful gift," she said, carefully placing the coral model in her bag. "I'll keep it on my desk at the research center." Atlas nodded, satisfied with this outcome. "Zephyr made something too, but he's being weird about giving it to you." "That's okay. He needs more time, and that's completely understandable." "He's not really angry anymore," Atlas informed her, his insight into his twin revealing the depth of their connection. "He's scared." "Of what?" "That you'll disappear again, that this was just because of the storm, and once you leave, you won't come back." The astute observation from a 10-year-old boy humbled Lyra. "I promise you, Atlas, I'm coming back. If you and your brother want me in your lives, nothing will keep me away this time." "Dad says promises to children are sacred contracts." He replied seriously. "Your father is absolutely right." She held his gaze steadily. "And I make this promise with complete intention to honor it." Satisfied, Atlas turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "Zephyr is in the greenhouse. In case you wanted to say goodbye before you go." Lyra found Zephyr in the attached greenhouse, a magnificent glass structure filled with thriving plants and sophisticated hydroponic systems. He was methodically checking water pH levels, recording results in a digital tablet. Unlike his brother's direct approach, Zephyr's emotional struggle played across his expressive features as he pretended not to notice her arrival. "Your garden is impressive," Lyra said by way of greeting. Zephyr glanced up, his initial wariness giving way to reluctant pride. "We're experimenting with different growing conditions for coastal vegetation. Some of these species can help prevent beach erosion." "Smart application," she commented, genuinely impressed by the environmental focus. "Is this part of a school project?" "No, just personal interest." He adjusted a nutrient feed, avoiding eye contact. Dad says some of these plants might be useful for his next coastal housing project. Your father always did think holistically about his designs. Lyra moved closer, examining a particularly healthy specimen of sea oats. These are thriving under your care. Plants are easier than people, Zephyr observed, the philosophical comment surprising from a 10-year-old. They tell you exactly what they need if you pay attention. That's very insightful. People are certainly more complicated. Yeah. He finally met her eyes. Like when someone says they're leaving to get better, but then they don't come back, even when they are better. The direct confrontation was pure Zephyr, emotional, unfiltered, straight to the heart of his pain. I deserve that, Lyra acknowledged quietly. And you deserve an honest answer. The truth is, Zephyr, I convinced myself that staying away was better for you and Atlas, that you had a stable, happy life with your father, and my reappearance would only confuse and disrupt that stability. But that was your choice, not ours, he pointed out, his logic devastating in its simplicity. Yes, and it was the wrong choice. She met his accusation with complete acceptance. I can't change the past 10 years, but I can promise you this. From now on, you and Atlas get a say in our relationship. If you want me in your lives, I'll be here. If you need space, I'll respect that too. Zephyr considered this, his expression thoughtful as he processed her words. Finally, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small woven bracelet, green and blue threads interlaced with tiny shells. I made this last night, he said, extending it toward her. Atlas said you had made similar ones for our birthdays. Lyra accepted the bracelet with trembling fingers, recognizing the pattern as nearly identical to the ones she had created for their 5th birthday. Gifts never delivered, but preserved in her memory box. How did you know the design? She asked, voice thick with emotion. Dad has photos of you wearing one like it, Zephyr explained, in the box of pictures he keeps. The revelation that Orion had maintained such detailed records of their shared past, enough for their son to recreate a pattern from photographs, left Lyra momentarily speechless. Thank you, she finally managed, slipping the bracelet onto her wrist. I'll wear it every day. Zephyr nodded, apparently satisfied with this promise. You should go. Your team needs you. Yes, but I'll be back on Saturday for your robotics competition. She hesitated before adding, if that's still okay with you. It's okay, he confirmed, returning to his plants. We're in the advanced division. Competition starts at 10 a.m. I'll be there by 9:30, Lyra promised, recognizing the exchange for what it was, not just information, but an invitation, a small opening in the walls Zephyr had built around his heart. In the main house, Orion was loading the last of Lyra's belongings into her vehicle. The twins had said their goodbyes and retreated inside, leaving the adults to navigate their own complicated farewell. Thank you, Lyra said simply, for not poisoning them against me, for preserving some connection, however tenuous. They're as much yours as mine, Orion replied. They always have been. He hesitated before adding, are you sure about Saturday? The competition can get intense and the boys might be too focused to interact much. I'm sure. Even if I just sit in the audience and watch, it's a start. She met his eyes directly. Unless you'd rather I didn't come. That's not it at all. He ran a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture from their shared past. We're in uncharted territory here, Lyra, for all of us. I know. She took a deep breath. But if this storm taught us anything, it's that sometimes the universe forces confrontations we've been avoiding. Maybe it's time we stopped working around each other and started working together, for their sake. As she slid into the driver's seat, Lyra looked up at the glass house on the hill, a structure that embodied Orion's vision and housed the children she had never known. For the first time in a decade, the sight filled her not with regret, but with possibility. Saturday then, Orion confirmed, stepping back from the vehicle. Saturday, Lyra agreed, starting the engine. And many days after. As she drove down the winding mountain road, navigating between crews still clearing debris, Lyra felt the tidal pull of opposing forces. Her responsibility to the research team waiting at the coastal center and the magnetic draw of the family she had just rediscovered. For 10 years, she had allowed these forces to remain separate, convinced they could not coexist. Now, with a handcrafted coral reef model in her bag and a woven bracelet on her wrist, she wondered if integration might finally be possible. Chapter 10. Where Hearts Align. The regional robotics competition hummed with excitement. Hundreds of children and parents filled the university fieldhouse, where competition arenas had been constructed for various age divisions. Elaborate robots navigated obstacle courses, lifted objects, and performed tasks of increasing complexity, while judges evaluated performance and technical innovation. Lyra arrived at 9:15 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than promised. She scanned the crowded venue anxiously, searching for familiar faces among the sea of participants. Dr. Valencia. She turned to find Atlas waving from a preparation area where teams worked frantically on last-minute adjustments. Beside him, Zephyr was fine-tuning what appeared to be a sophisticated aquatic robot designed to navigate a water-based obstacle course. Lyra made her way through the crowd, conscious of curious glances from other parents. She had dressed carefully. That morning, professional but approachable in dark jeans and a jewel-toned blouse, the woven bracelet Zephyr had given her prominently displayed on her wrist. "You came," Atlas said, adjusting his glasses with obvious pleasure. "Of course," she replied simply. "I promised I would." Zephyr looked up from his calibrations, his expression guarded but not hostile. "We're in Arena 3, starting in 20 minutes. Dad went to register us." "Your robot looks impressive," Lyra observed, studying the aquatic device. "Did you design the propulsion system?" "Atlas did the propulsion. I did the navigation programming," Zephyr explained. Professional pride, momentarily overriding personal complexity. "It's designed to collect microplastic samples while mapping underwater terrain." "Environmental application," Lyra noted, genuine admiration in her voice. "That's innovative for this competition level." "Dad said practical applications score higher. With judges," Atlas explained, "and we were already interested in ocean cleanup." Before Lyra could respond, Orion appeared with registration materials and team badges. He stopped short upon seeing her, surprise and something warmer flashing across his features. "You're early," he observed, handing badges to the twins. "Couldn't risk missing anything," Lyra replied simply. Something shifted in Orion's expression, a subtle softening, a recognition of her commitment to this new beginning. "They're in the advanced division this year, youngest team to qualify." "We're going to crush it," Zephyr declared with newfound animation. "Our bot can complete the course in half the standard time. Assuming the salinity calibration holds," Atlas added, ever the pragmatist. As they discussed technical details, Lyra observed the easy rapport between father and sons. The shorthand communication developed over years of shared projects and passions. Rather than feeling excluded, she found herself appreciating the strong foundation Orion had built with their children. "Competitors to Arena 3 for preliminary heats," announced a voice over the loudspeaker. "That's us," Atlas said carefully, lifting their robot. "Spectator seating is along the north wall." "We'll be watching," Orion assured them. "Remember, process over outcome. Focus on execution, not the other teams," Zephyr recited, suggesting this was a familiar mantra. As the twins moved toward the competition arena, Lyra and Orion navigated to the spectator area, finding seats with a clear view of the aquatic testing pool. "They seem confident," Lyra observed. "They should be. They've been working on that design for months." Pride colored Orion's voice. "The environmental application was entirely their idea. Said they wanted to create something that would help your research." The revelation stunned Lyra. My research? They designed it with that in mind. Orion nodded, watching as the twins prepared their robot at the starting position. After they learned who you really were, they stayed up all night modifying their original design to incorporate oceanic microplastic collection. Said if their mother was going to watch them compete, they wanted to show what they could contribute to her field. Tears threatened at this unexpected connection, her sons creating technology that bridged their father's engineering expertise and her marine conservation work. Before she could respond, the competition began. The next 2 hours, they watched the twins guide their robot through increasingly difficult challenges. The device performed flawlessly, navigating underwater obstacles while collecting sample materials with precision that impressed even the most experienced judges. Between heats, the boys would glance toward the spectator area, their expressions brightening visibly when they confirmed both parents were still watching. "They're showing off for you," Orion murmured during the semi-final round. "I've never seen them this focused." "They're extraordinary," Lyra whispered back. "You've raised them to be extraordinary." His hand found hers briefly in the darkened spectator area, a momentary connection there and gone before either could fully acknowledge it. "They're half you, Lyra. Always have been." The simple truth hung between them as the final round began. The twins' robot executed its most complex sequence yet, collecting samples while mapping the underwater terrain with remarkable accuracy. When the judges announced their first-place finish, the boys' celebration was immediate and exuberant. Lyra and Orion met them at the award area, where they proudly displayed their trophy and technical achievement certificates. "Did you see when it navigated the underwater cave system?" Zephyr asked excitedly. "The sonar mapping worked perfectly, and the collection mechanism exceeded capacity expectations by 30%, Atlas added, his usual reserve overcome. "By triumph, we saw everything," Orion assured them, accepting high fives from both boys. "You were outstanding." "Dr. Valencia, did you see the sample collection data?" Atlas asked eagerly. "We used the same classification parameters as your research. Team's recent paper on microplastic identification, the direct inclusion, his deliberate effort to connect his achievement to her work, moved Lyra deeply. I noticed that. The resolution was impressive, especially for a robotics competition model. We have the prototype designs at home," Zephyr offered unexpectedly. "If you want to see them sometime." The casual invitation represented a monumental shift from the boy who had barely acknowledged her days earlier. "I would love that," Lyra replied carefully, trying to contain her emotion. As other competitors and parents congratulated the twins, a competition official approached with a special commendation. "The judges were particularly impressed with your environmental application," she explained, presenting an additional certificate. "They'd like to know if you'd be willing to demonstrate your design at the National Ocean Sciences meeting next month." The twins looked to both parents, their excitement tinged with uncertainty. "Can we, Dad?" Atlas asked. "That depends," Orion replied thoughtfully. "The conference is in San Diego, which means travel arrangements, accommodations, my research. Center is co-sponsoring that conference," Lyra interjected quietly. "I'll be presenting our latest findings on microplastic distribution in coastal ecosystems." 4 pairs of eyes met in a moment of perfect alignment. The possibility of their first family trip, centered around shared scientific passion, hanging in the balance. "We could make it work," Orion suggested carefully, "if everyone is interested." "Yes," the twins responded in enthusiastic unison. Lyra met Orion's gaze over their sons' heads, a silent communication passing between them, acknowledgement of boundaries, crossed possibilities opening, a future unfolding differently than either had imagined. As they left the competition venue, trophy proudly carried between the twins, Lyra's phone chimed with a message from her research team. She checked it briefly before returning her attention to the family discussion of celebration dinner options. "Everything okay at the center?" Orion asked, noting her quick phone check. "Yes, just confirmation of some test results." She hesitated before adding, "and approval of my request for adjusted scheduling." "Adjusted scheduling?" he questioned. "I've arranged to be based at the coastal facility permanently rather than traveling between research sites," Lyra explained. "It means I'll be within an hour's drive of here indefinitely." The implication wasn't lost on any of them. This wasn't a temporary arrangement or a brief reconnection. It was a commitment to sustained presence in her sons' lives. "Does that mean you'll come to more of our competitions?" Atlas asked, hope evident in his voice. "And maybe help with my greenhouse experiments?" Zephyr added tentatively. "Some of my coastal plants aren't thriving." "If you want my help, absolutely," Lyra confirmed, careful to respect their agency in this evolving relationship. "My schedule will still include research responsibilities, but I've made it clear to my team that family commitments are my priority now." "Family," Zephyr repeated, testing the word carefully. "So you're staying for real this time?" It wasn't a question, but Lyra answered it anyway. For real this time. No more running away, no more hiding behind work or fear or anything else. As they reached the vehicles, the logistics of their current situation reasserted themselves. 2 separate cars, 2 separate homes, 4 lives still finding their way toward new configuration. "We should discuss arrangements for the San Diego trip," Orion suggested practically. "Perhaps over dinner next week? My place, or—" "Actually," Lyra began, gathering her courage, "I've been looking at rental properties near the coastal research center. There's a house available with a good-sized yard and room for the boys to have their own space when they visit. If they want to visit, that is." The twins exchanged one of their communicative glances before Atlas spoke. "Would we have room for science projects there too?" "Absolutely. There's a converted garage that would make an excellent workshop space." "What about my plants?" Zephyr questioned. "Some of them are pretty established. The yard gets excellent southern exposure, and there's a greenhouse structure that needs some renovation but has good bones." Lyra had clearly researched this property with their specific interests in mind. The details of the home, selected for its potential to accommodate 2 scientifically minded boys and their projects, weren't lost on Orion. His expression softened as he recognized the thought she had put into creating a space where their sons might feel welcome. "It sounds perfect," he acknowledged, "for weekend visits and school holidays." "To start with," Lyra agreed carefully, "and we can adjust as needed, based on what works for everyone." The conversation paused as they reached their vehicles, the practical reality of separation reasserting itself. But unlike days earlier, when Lyra's departure from the glass house had been laden with uncertainty, this parting carried promise of imminent reunion. "Next Saturday," she confirmed, looking to the twins for approval. "We'll help you move in," Atlas offered pragmatically. "Dad's truck can carry more than your car. And I can bring some plant cuttings for your greenhouse," Zephyr added, to get it started right. Their casual inclusion of her in future plans, the assumption of continued connection rather than tentative possibility, represented a seismic shift from the hurt, angry boys of days earlier. As goodbyes were exchanged and separate vehicles prepared for departure, Orion hung back briefly, catching Lyra's eye over the hood of her car. "Thank you," he said simply, "for coming back not just today, but for good," she finished for him. "It took a storm, 2 meddling 10-year-olds, and a dating app to get me here. But I'm staying this time." Something indefinable passed between them then. Not romance rekindled, not yet, but the recognition of a shared future taking shape, different from what they had once imagined, but perhaps equally meaningful. "I never stopped loving them," Lyra whispered, the admission both apology and promise. Or you. Orion's expression softened, years of hurt and loneliness visible in his eyes, but also something new, a cautious hope. We have time now, he said finally. Time to figure out what comes next, all of us together. As Lyra drove toward the coastal facility that had been her refuge for years, she glanced in the rearview mirror to see the three figures still standing in the parking lot, Orion and their sons, watching her departure. But unlike every other time she had driven away from them, today's separation was temporary, a brief interlude rather than an ending. On her wrist, the bracelet Zephyr had woven caught the afternoon sunlight, its blue and green threads symbolizing the ocean that had once divided her from her family, but now formed a bridge between their worlds. In her bag, Atlas's coral model waited to take its place on her desk, a daily reminder of the brilliant minds and open hearts she had almost lost forever. The road ahead curved toward the coast, where her professional responsibilities awaited. But for the first time in a decade, she drove with the certainty that another road, one leading back to a glass house on a hill and the family within it, would always remain open, ready for her return whenever she chose to follow it. No longer would ocean and architecture exist as separate realms in her fractured life. The vision of her son's robot, designed to protect marine ecosystems while navigating complex underwater structures, had shown her what was possible when these worlds merged. Something stronger, more complete, and infinitely more beautiful than either could be alone. The storm that had forced their reunion had cleared, leaving behind not destruction, but possibility, a landscape washed clean, ready for whatever they chose to build upon it. Together. As she rounded the final curve that would take her to the coast, Lyra reached for her phone and placed it in the hands-free holder. With a deep breath, she tapped the screen to make a call. "Aria, it's me," she said when her sister answered. "You're not going to believe what happened this weekend. Remember that architect from the dating app? Well, it turns out he's Orion. Yes, that Orion and the twins, they're amazing, Aria, absolutely brilliant, and they want to know me." Her voice broke slightly on those last words, the magnitude of this second chance overwhelming her composure. "I'm coming home to pack some things, but then I'm going back, for good this time." As Lyra shared the story of her unlikely reunion with the sister who had witnessed her decade of grief and guilt, the coastal highway stretched before her, no longer a path of escape, but a route connecting the two halves of her heart. The scientist she had become and the mother she had always been. In the rearview mirror, the mountains that held her family receded temporarily from view, but remained fixed in her awareness. And for the first time in 10 years, Lyra Valencia drove with no storm clouds on the horizon, only the clear skies of possibility stretching endlessly in every direction.